Hello, Richard. Nice to see you here in St. Petersburg. Thank you so much for coming to Russia.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, the first question will be one of those that actually bothers a lot of our subscribers and us as well. So as you know, during Soviet Union times, the common ideology was atheism. So there was officially no religion. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, especially in the 90s, people started to believe all kinds of stuff, magicians, psychics. You as an evolutionary biologist, do you have any theories? Why did it happen? Why people from a very atheistic society became very religious and easy to believe?
I can only think some kind of a backlash against the government imposition of atheism. I can imagine that people would have rebelled against the idea of being told what they ought to believe or what they ought not to believe. To me, it's baffling because there simply is no good reason to believe in religion. And so I'm rather discouraged that this has happened. I believe the same thing is happening in China as well. So no, I don't have any explanation other than the idea of backlash against the previous regime.
Dawkins' theories are very close to the ideas of early theomachist Bolsheviks who blew up churches, persecuted spiritual people and clergy. His talk on Geek Picnic Festival pushes the society towards incitement of hatred, undermining the social stability, this time in the new century. This is how State Duma Deputy Vitaly Milonov demanded the cancellation of Dawkins' lecture in his letter to the organizers of the festival. As a response, an additional security was appointed to Professor Dawkins. The only one to stand out as an opponent to Richard was probably the most well-known graduate of 1984 of the Department of History and Scientific Atheism in Moscow State University, Archdeacon Andrei Kuraev. During the same festival, he gave a lecture, Faith and Reason, the Dawkins Delusion. As far as we considered, the theologian and the professor didn't meet.
Also, lots of subscribers, they ask this, pretty much the same question. They basically asking for your advice. Because you know the situation now probably in Russia with the religion, that it's became more powerful, popular, and we have different laws like protection the feelings of religious people and stuff like that. And lots of people, they ask what should they do, for example, if they live in a very religious society, for example, in a Muslim country. They live in a religious family, nobody actually thinks the same way as they think, so they're basically alone. So what should they do?
I hesitate to give advice, and I don't live here, I don't know the situation. I'm aware that people who are not religious and are surrounded by religious families are in a rather tragic situation. This happens in America as well as in Islamic countries. My way would be to argue. My way would not be to run away. It would be to say to these religious relatives, your beliefs are stupid. They have no basis. Or defend them to me. Tell me why you believe. Have you any reason? No, you have not a reason. You're being silly. I would argue. That's not everybody's way, and it's particularly difficult if they find themselves, as you say, ostracized, shunned by their own family.
How to stop fighting with spiritual people and help them think more rationally. How to make them check things they consider to be true. In 2016, with the help of Dawkins Foundation, a little-known app designed to help atheists to act more rationally in such discussions came out. Theos is an English-language manual that looks a lot like a text quest collection. Imagine you have to start a conversation with a religious person. It might be a beggar on the street asking for some change for the sake of God, or some religious activist who is attacking you demanding to acknowledge the existence of God. You need to choose how you would respond, and the app tells you why this particular phrase will take your conversation to a dead end, but another might lead into a meaningful direction.
Do you think that because you have a great big deal of experience in what you say, or just said, arguing, trying to explain people that your beliefs are not based on anything. So is it actually effective to try to reason with people of faith?
I think people who are completely blinded by faith, probably not. But I suspect there are a lot of people who just haven't thought about it very much. So people sitting on the fence who really haven't given it much thought, and they're the people that I would try to reach.
In Russia, we have this new thing I've already mentioned before. The law, it's called the protection of feelings of religious people. So basically, you can get even to prison for anything harsh if you say it out loud to someone, or if you make a funny picture, or if you make a post on your social media, something that if there is a religious person who feels offended, they can sue you and you'll get in big trouble. So can the fact that atheism exists offend religious people?
Will I be sent to prison if I say what a ridiculous, stupid, idiotic law that is?
We'll see. Probably not. Yeah.
I mean, injuring people is one thing, injuring beliefs is another. Beliefs have no feelings. Beliefs are just out there. To be sent to prison for insulting somebody's beliefs is a truly stupid, ridiculous law.
Speaking about different ridiculous things, recently we had the theology, the study of religion, became a science. It became a specialty, and now you can even get a PhD. It is a PhD in philosophy, but your specialty will be theology. And the first person have defended his dissertation on that. Do you think there is any danger about that, about making theology a science and to make it official and legal?
If you go to Department of Theology in a university, you will find people there who are doing very respectable academic work, perhaps translating ancient documents, Dead Sea Scrolls, comparing different versions of the book of Isaiah, things like that, biblical history, archaeology. This is all perfectly respectable academic work. Theology, I think, is a non-subject when it moves over to the study of doctrine, like transubstantiation and the mystery of the Trinity and things like that. That's not a respectable subject for an academic discipline or for getting a PhD.
For the first time in Russia, a PhD title was given by a secular university for research in the field of theology. In his work, the author of the thesis points out the existence of special scientific theological method of research. He claims that it's not the same scientific method used in linguistics, source study, and other disciplines which are being studied, for example, in theology departments of some universities, including Oxford University, where Richard Dawkins has studied. This special method relies, among other things, on personal experience from life and faith of the theologian. If you speak Russian, you can read the thesis yourself and decide what to think of it. You'll find the link in the description.
It's known that lots of people who are fanatics, basically, they're ready to put their lives defending their faith or spreading it. And what about you? You being like probably not the icon is bad word, but you're one of the leaders of atheism. Maybe are you ready to suffer and to put your life at stake?
No. It would be irrational to do so.
Okay. But some people do. Haven't you heard any cases about when people were killed in Islamic countries as well for their beliefs?
They're extremely brave, and I think it's shocking that they put their lives that their lives are in danger. My organization in America, the Center for Inquiry and the Richard Dawkins Foundation, is involved in trying to help people in, for example, Bangladesh, who are threatened with their lives for no crime other than freedom of speech in often a very moderate, mild way. I think it's utterly shocking that religion should abrogate to itself the privilege of killing people simply for disagreeing with you.
In Bangladesh, religious fanatics kill up to several people each week who dare to say out loud that they don't believe in God. Writers, journalists, politicians, bloggers. It all started in 2013 when Islamist gangs started to appear all over the country. In 2 years, it turned into a real massacre. People are being attacked near their homes, workplaces, and even in public transport. Their relatives and friends are also in danger. Police doesn't follow through even 1% of such crimes. The Richard Dawkins Foundation helps to save those who manage to live and get out of the country. More on what happens when fleeing isn't possible you can learn in the article on the Foundation program. The link is in the description.
Okay, and now moving on to more interesting and fun to science. So you've written lots of books and scientific papers and popular books and scientific books, so on. Maybe you have something that you want to change in what you have written in the books that are already published?
I would like to answer yes to that question, but I don't think so. I mean, scientists, in a way, gain prestige from changing their minds, unlike politicians. But I haven't changed my mind. For example, the central point of the selfish gene, I think, is absolutely valid and has not in any way been diminished by recent magnificent advances in the study of genomics.
But you still have, I think there are 2 or 3 editions of Selfish Gene. I mean, it's
yes, there's mainly 2 editions. There was the original one was 1976, and then there was a revised edition in 1989, which was more an addition. It didn't change anything from the original, but it was 2 extra chapters, plus rather substantial endnotes, enlarging upon points in the original, but nothing really changed.
Do you have any ideas about new books? Maybe something that you wanted to write for a long time, but you didn't get a chance to?
Well, I've got a book that's just come out in Britain called Science in the Soul, which is a collection of previously published papers, which I hope will be translated into Russian. So I'm mostly occupied at the moment in promoting that book. I don't have any immediate plans for other books, although there are several possibilities that I'm thinking about.
Because lots of people are expecting for something new to get something new from you.
As I say, I've got various possibilities, but nothing very advanced at the moment.
And that book that just came out in Britain, it's a collection of your papers,
collection of previously published articles, yes, Science in the Soul.
Science or popular science?
Well, the title is Science in the Soul. It's sort of, I mean, it's a little bit provocative because the word soul sounds religious because it isn't. It means soul in the sense of sort of the romance of science, the Carl Sagan school of promoting the poetry of science.
Ah, that's very beautiful. So your first book, Selfish Gene, is now actually a part of a university course on evolutionary biology. It's recommended in Russia. But the later books, they are now more in like popular science category. So why do you think it's only Selfish Gene that is officially acknowledged as an academical book and the rest is more like popular?
Well, they're all aimed at the same audience, really, but I suppose the Selfish Gene, I can see why that would be part of a university curriculum, because it does explain in somewhat unfamiliar ways the central doctrine of neo-Darwinism, the gene-based theory of evolution. My other books, like The Blind Watchmaker, are in a way aimed at explaining things to lay people, not quite so much expounding something that students need to know in order to get a degree in biology.
Also, one of the big additions to the culture and to the world from Selfish Gene is your meme theory. Of course, so one of the most popular questions from our subscribers is, what is your favorite meme? And maybe not internet meme, not like this funny pictures now, but just overall.
Well, I mean, a meme is just anything that's imitated from brain to brain. So it's not, I don't think the word favorite is really appropriate. I wouldn't answer that question. I would just say it's a theory of how culture might be brought under the Darwinian framework. And so favorite could mean the best example of a self-propagating meme. And that would be very different from one that gives me any pleasure. I mean, that would be something like religion, for example, is a very successful meme. But I despise religion, so I wouldn't call it favorite in that sense.
Can science be a meme?
Well, anything that spreads can. Yeah. So as a good idea if it spreads because it's good, could be called a meme. But I'm not sure it's very helpful to use the terminology for that.
Okay, and you're still agree, I mean, you still think the same about the meme theory as you were thinking about it when you created it?
Well, pretty much, but
any changes?
Well, what's happened is that especially Dan Dennett and Susan Blackmore have taken the idea of the meme and used it in a rather more ambitious way than I had in mind. So for me, it was just a way of saying the Darwinian theory of self-replicating entities surviving can be applied to human culture. Dennett and Blackmore have actually used that to explain, in Dennett's case, well, human mentality, human consciousness. In Susan Blackmore's case, the enlargement of the human brain.
And also, it's her theory about T-memes, like technical memes?
Yes, I don't buy the need for a new word.
For you, it just meme is anything.
Yeah.
Susan Blackmore, psychologist and a specialist in memetics, a field similar to genetics that studies memes instead. She proposes a view on humans as meme machines, who also have created a new type, these replicators, T-memes, which spread through technology. In her book, The Meme Machine, with a foreword by Richard Dawkins, she tries to prove that memetics is indeed a fully functional scientific theory. The book is not yet published in Russian language. Daniel Dennett, a philosopher and cognitive scientist, proposes to look at the whole history as a result of evolution, where memes, the cultural replicators, which spread like viruses, rule instead of genes. You can read more on the subject in his book From Bacteria to Bach and Back: The Evolution of Minds. Unfortunately, the book is not yet published in Russian as well.
Speaking about new science and scientific progress, do you think that ethical questions slow down scientific process? I mean, the cloning, human experiments, human embryo experiments, which are not allowed in many countries. Do you think that kind of slows down the progress?
Well, I don't feel very strongly against such things, as many people do. I don't have a kind of yuck reaction. I don't feel it's playing God. I think that ethics enter into it where suffering is involved. So human cloning, for example, if it doesn't cause suffering, then I'm not bothered by it. For example, if there was to be the first cloned baby, the first cloned individual, might suffer because she would be hounded by popular newspapers and given an unpleasant life because of that. That would be my kind of ethical concern. I would not worry about stepping beyond the bounds of where we ought to go, that kind of thing. I'm interested in the science. I would like to see it done from a scientific point of view, but I would be sympathetic towards the sort of life that the first cloned human might have.
And what about the experiments that we have now, in genetic experiments involving other animals? For example, mice are subjects to lots of different experiments which make them suffer.
I would worry about that. I mean, that to me is what we should worry about, making the mice suffer. But many people are not worried about making the mice suffer. They're worried about, blurring the boundary between humans and other animals. I don't worry about that.
Are you expecting any new fundamental discoveries in evolutionary biology?
I think that because genetics is becoming so digital, so much a branch of information technology, we can expect massive new things, exciting new things from molecular genetics. It's becoming possible, easy, cheap, to sequence the DNA of any species you like. And so this gives us the possibility of getting the complete tree of life, the complete family tree of all life. So that would be extremely exciting and is happening at a fast pace.
So if you have one question that you want evolutionary biology and genetics to answer, is it that tree of like evolutionary tree or something else?
That will happen anyway.
Okay.
I suppose a bigger mystery is human consciousness, how brain physiology gives rise to the subjective feelings that each of us know we have. That's a really big question. The other one, I suppose, would be the origin of life. I would like to know how that started.
And do you think that genetics can answer the question about consciousness?
Well, not so much genetics. I think neurophysiology.
Yeah. One of the advances that lots of people actually hope to get is the question of immortality, solving to become immortal. Lots of people want that. No death, good life. But as we know from other species that are kind of immortal, like immortal jellyfishes and some other simpler animals, immortality is it's not a piece of cake. It's not something always great. Do you want people to become immortal?
Well, they'd have to stop reproducing if they did, because otherwise there are just too many of us.
Colonizing other planets?
That's a pipe dream. I mean, we might set up a colony on Mars. That's quite likely, but that wouldn't take long to fill up the available space there either.
But if we get rid of the technical side of being mortal, overpopulation, stuff like that, just the whole idea of immortality for a person, for a human, do you think it is something worth exploring, something worth fighting for?
I wouldn't mind 150 years, but I think after that, I'd have had enough.
Okay. So some personal questions speaking. Okay, you said 150 years. And what about the death itself? Because it's a very biological topic, so it's probably the best to discuss it with you. Death. And do you think about death very often?
I think that what is frightening about death is not... I think what's frightening is eternity. The idea of just going on and on and on and on. And so my feeling about eternity is that I would like to spend it under a general anesthetic, which is what's going to happen.
So you already have... Because... Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, I think it was your talk, you were sitting together. A guy asked what he believes will happen after death, and Neil said that he wants to be buried, so all the nutrients that are now in him will go back to the plants. We asked the same question to Lawrence. He said he wants to be cremated as long as all the carbon dioxide will be recycled. What about you?
I'm reminded of my friend, the great William D. Hamilton, W.D. Hamilton, who said he wanted to be laid out in the Brazilian rainforest with a fence around to stop scavenging mammals, and burying beetles would carry him underground. And then the following year, the larvae of the beetles, having fed on him, would emerge as adults. This blue iridescent cloud of beetles rising up into the forest and spreading out over the forest canopy. Bill Hamilton would be in this cloud of iridescent blue.
That's beautiful.
Unfortunately, it never happened.
And so you want something like that?
I haven't given it that much thought.
Oh, okay. And as death is a complicated topic, not for everybody, but especially for kids, how can you explain the fact of death to a kid, especially if some relative dies? And because that's where people pretty often use religion and fairy tales, saying that, don't worry, there is afterlife and so on. How do you think it's possible to explain that to a kid without using fairy tales and afterlife?
I don't have a very good solution to that problem. I'm not in favor of telling lies. I'm not in favor of deceiving children. So I think you have to tell them the truth. But I think at least you could say something like, your grandmother is dead. She's not suffering. She's at peace. I think my general anesthetic analogy is probably the best one.
In your life, is there anything that you regret most? What would you regret most of all in your life?
I'm not sure I can answer for myself, but maybe I could quote a rather amusing story of the English poet John Betjeman, who was asked that exact question. So, John, you've come to the end of a long, he must have been in his 80s or 90s, long life? Is there anything you regret? And he said, not enough sex.
Just imagine, a thought experiment that you've met a god, a genie, someone who can grant you wishes. And you have one wish to change something right now, right here, immediately. What would it be?
I think it would be that everyone in the world should base their lives, base their beliefs upon evidence and give up superstition and superstition of all kinds, including religious faith, and base their lives upon a desire to do good, to have a good life, an enjoyable life, and to leave the world a better place than they found it.
Do you remember your first love? The first time you fell in love? This feeling, like butterflies, stuff like that. Many people, they oppose love, the feeling of being in love, and rationality. Would you prefer maybe to switch them, to trade rationality for this beautiful feeling of falling in love?
As a
magic.
biologist, I can, as it were, rationalize what falling in love means and understand it from that point of view. But that doesn't in any way diminish the feeling of passion that I can feel as a human being. I am a human being. I may understand the basis for the feeling of love, which is a profound passion, and enjoy it.
What is happiness for you, in your understanding? What is happiness, and when do you personally feel happy?
I was once on a BBC program called The Brains Trust, in which we were given questions like that, and I hated it. We were indeed actually asked, what is happiness? And one of my fellow panelists was a poet, and he said, happiness is a mountain stream cascading down the mountain between the rocks. I don't do that kind of thing.
Well, but, okay, even from biological point of view, I mean, you know that there is the feeling that people call happiness. And maybe what makes you feel good? What drives your reward system in your brain? What do you enjoy?
Maybe something similar to what John Betjeman said.
There was a pretty famous scientist, physicist, Sergei Kapitsa, and maybe you know him or his father, they're big academics. And he had his talk show where he was inviting different scientists, and in the end he would always ask them to make a prediction for some number of years, and then they will pull the paper with amount of years, so they need to make a prediction. Can you make any prediction for the future? What is your vision of our life as a humankind on this planet, or maybe not on this planet, for next 50 years, or maybe 20?
Okay, 50 and 20 are fairly short times to ask of an evolutionist. So we're not talking evolutionary time now, we're talking historical time. So I can answer that not as a biologist, but as a citizen, an observer of the world.
Okay.
And I suppose the computer revolution, Moore's law, the doubling of computer power, I forget what the time is, but it's very short anyway. That's probably going to continue, and we're going to see a great continuation of the role of computation, of electronics in our lives. Some people fear this because artificial intelligence is perhaps going to become more and more prominent. We're going to see computers taking over not just manual labor, but the role of doctors and lawyers and people like that. So I think you may see a lot more of that kind of thing. Virtual reality, where your eyes are presented with not what's actually out there, but with a computer-controlled world, which is somehow constrained by what you do. If virtual reality becomes sufficiently well rendered that it is almost indistinguishable from reality. People may withdraw into that world.
Yes.
And one could imagine a sort of ultimate couch potato who never gets up but just lives in a fantasy world generated by computer. We're moving into science fiction now. Colonizing other planets does seem to be a fairly likely possibility. The more ambitious among those people actually see the possibility of the so-called greening of Mars, actually turning Mars into a...
Like terraforming.
Terraforming. And that's an ambitious project. More realistic would be perhaps living in great big domes, great big greenhouses, which are not really the whole planet, but...
So you're mostly positive. You have a positive view on the world.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, some of my colleagues, for example, the astronomer Royal Martin Rees, gives us a 50% chance of surviving the 21st century. And there are other such pessimists.
And as an evolutionary biologist, probably your years. I mean, for you, it's more comfortable to make predictions for like millions of years.
Well, it's not comfortable, but if you want to see evolutionary change, you've got to wait longer than 50 years.
Do you have any predictions about evolutionary change that
not really, because the selection pressures that we're under are so hard to define. There was a time when, for the last a million years ago, when the selection pressures were starvation, disease, lions eating you, snake bite, that kind of thing, and falling out of trees. Now, the selection pressures, if there are any, are changing all the time because human culture is changing so rapidly that you can't say there's any consistent pressure in any one direction.
Can it be that we will move on from natural selection, basically like the forces of nature deciding who will live or not, towards more like cultural selection, meaning like the wars fought over ideas?
Yes, well, in a way, that was part of the idea of the meme theory, that selection will move over from genes to memes. And that, of course, is already happening. So yes, I mean, the change that we see will be massively cultural rather than genetic.
And what do you think is possible to do for everybody, for like simple people who live in, I don't know, some remote towns, don't have much resources, but they want to spread, so to say, our meme of science and critical thinking? What can they do?
Well, computers are getting cheaper, and so I think access to computers may become much more widespread, even in poorer countries. Mm-hmm. And that offers the opportunity for education, for enjoying the fruits of civilization.
Okay, then I guess that we are done. And just one last little thing. So, as I said, we have here representatives from 2 channels, and together we have 500,000 people, subscribers who are interested in science. Maybe you have something to say to them, something encouraging, and imagine like 500,000 Russian-speaking people who are interested in science and in your work and in this interview probably. What is there anything you want to say them?
The only reason to believe anything is true is evidence. Mistrust anybody who tries to persuade you that faith or revelation or authority or holy books have anything to say to you of any value. Evidence is the only reason to believe anything.
Hello, Richard. Nice to see you here in St. Petersburg. Thank you so much for coming to Russia.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, the first question will be one of those that actually bothers a lot of our subscribers and us as well. So as you know, during Soviet Union times, the common ideology was atheism. So there was officially no religion. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, especially in the 90s, people started to believe all kinds of stuff, magicians, psychics. You as an evolutionary biologist, do you have any theories? Why did it happen? Why people from a very atheistic society became very religious and easy to believe?
I can only think some kind of a backlash against the government imposition of atheism. I can imagine that people would have rebelled against the idea of being told what they ought to believe.
As far as we consider, the theologian and the professor didn't meet.
Also, lots of subscribers, they ask pretty much the same question. They basically asking for your advice. Because you know the situation now probably in Russia with the religion, that it's became more powerful, popular, and we have different laws like protection the feelings of religious people and stuff like that. And lots of people, they ask what should they do, for example, if they live in a very religious society, for example, in a Muslim country, they live in a religious family, nobody actually thinks the same way as they think, so they're basically alone. So what should they do?
I hesitate to give advice, and I don't live here, I don't know the situation. I'm aware that people who are not religious and are surrounded by religious families are in a rather tragic situation. This happens in America as well as in Islamic countries. My way would be to argue. My way would not be to run away. It would be to say to these religious relatives, your beliefs are stupid. They have no basis or defense.
Have a great big deal of experience in what you say, or just said, arguing, trying to explain people that your beliefs are not based on anything. So is it actually effective to try to reason with people of faith?
I think people who are completely blinded by faith, probably not. But I suspect there are a lot of people who just haven't thought about it very much. So people sitting on the fence who really haven't given it much thought, and they're the people that I would try to reach.
In Russia, we have this new thing I've already mentioned before. This the law, it's called the protection of feelings of religious people. So basically, you can get even to prison for anything harsh if you say it out loud to someone, or if you make a funny picture, or if you make a post on your social media, something that if there is a religious person who feels offended, they can sue you and you'll get in big trouble. So can the fact that atheism exists offend religious people?
Will I be sent to prison if I say what a ridiculous, stupid, idiotic law that is, or what they ought not to believe? To me, it's baffling because there simply is no good reason to believe in religion. And so I'm rather discouraged that this has happened. I believe the same thing is happening in China as well. So no, I don't have any explanation other than the idea of backlash against the previous regime.
Dawkins' theories are very close to the ideas of early theomachist Bolsheviks who blew up churches, persecuted spiritual people and clergy. His talk on Geek Picnic Festival pushes the society towards incitement of hatred, undermining the social stability, this time in the new century. This is how State Duma Deputy Vitaly Milonov demanded the cancellation of Dawkins' lecture in his letter to the organizers of the festival. As a response, an additional security was appointed to Professor Dawkins. The only one to stand out as an opponent to Richard was probably the most well-known graduate of 1984 of the Department of History and Scientific Atheism in Moscow State University, Archdeacon Andrei Kuraev. During the same festival, he gave a lecture, Faith and Reason, the Dawkins Delusion.
Them to me. Tell me why you believe. Have you any reason? No, you have not a reason. You're being silly. I would argue that's not everybody's way, and it's particularly difficult if they find themselves, as you say, ostracized, shunned by their own family.
How to stop fighting with spiritual people and help them think more rationally. How to make them check things they consider to be true. In 2016, with the help of Dawkins Foundation, a little-known app designed to help atheists to act more rationally in such discussions came out. A Theos is an English-language manual that looks a lot like a text quest collection. Imagine you have to start a conversation with a religious person. It might be a beggar on the street asking for some change for the sake of God, or some religious activist who is attacking you demanding to acknowledge the existence of God. You need to choose how you would respond, and the app tells you why this particular phrase will take your conversation to a dead end, but another might lead into a meaningful direction.
Do you think that, because you